The clatter of the coffee machine was the loudest sound in our apartment. That, and the frantic thump, thump, thump of my own heart. Liam was at the kitchen island, meticulously arranging blueberries on his yogurt. Blueberries? His favorite. The little details always remained, even when the big picture was crumbling around us. Liam, I said, my voice a little too high-pitched, a little too eager. Did you remember to call the plumber? The drip in the bathroom is driving me crazy. He didn't look up, just kept placing blueberries. Tiny, perfect spheres of indifference. I waited. 5 seconds stretched into an eternity. My palms started to sweat. Liam? I repeated, louder this time, forcing a steadiness I didn't feel. Still nothing. Just the scrape of his spoon against the ceramic bowl. It wasn't just that he hadn't called the plumber. It was the way he hadn't called the plumber. Like I hadn't even spoken. Like I was a ghost haunting my own kitchen. This had been going on for weeks. Weeks of unanswered questions, of carefully phrased requests, met with a wall of silence. At first, I'd chalked it up to stress. Liam was working longer hours at the firm, buried in some high-stakes merger. I'd been understanding. Empathetic. A good wife. But empathy has its limits, especially when it feels like you're shouting into a void. I walked closer, my slippers padding softly on the hardwood floor. I could smell the faint sweetness of the yogurt, a smell that used to be comforting, now just another layer of infuriating normalcy. Liam, are you ignoring me? The words trembled slightly. I hated that they trembled. I wanted to be strong, to be defiant, but inside, I was just terrified. He finally looked up. His eyes, usually so warm and hazel, were blank, almost glassy, like he was looking through me. What? He asked, his voice flat. Neutral. The relief that washed over me was immediate and nauseating. Relief that he'd finally acknowledged my existence. How pathetic was that? The plumber, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Did you call him? He frowned, a tiny crease forming between his brows. What plumber? It was a performance, I knew it in my bones. A cruel, deliberate charade. He knew damn well what plumber I was talking about. The one we talked about last week, I said, each word clipped and precise. The one whose card is on the fridge. The one fixing the constant dripping that's keeping me up at night. He blinked slowly, like a lizard sunning itself on a rock. Oh, he said, finally. Right. The plumber. I forgot. Forgot. He forgot? The anger started to simmer, a low, dangerous heat in my chest. This wasn't just about the plumber. This was about disrespect, about being invisible, about the slow, insidious erosion of my own sanity. You forgot? I repeated, my voice rising. Liam, this is happening all the time. I ask you things, I tell you things, and you just ignore me. What is going on? He sighed, a long, theatrical sigh that grated on my nerves. Ava, I'm just stressed, okay? Work is crazy right now. I don't mean to ignore you, Ava. He hadn't called me that in weeks. He usually just grunted or used my name when he was talking to others. That's bullshit, Liam, and you know it. The words were out before I could stop them, sharp and accusatory. He slammed his spoon down on the counter, the clatter echoing in the sudden silence. Don't talk to me like that. Then don't treat me like I'm not here, I shot back. I'm your wife, Liam, not some piece of furniture you can just ignore. The air crackled with tension. We stood there, frozen, locked in a silent battle of wills. I stared into his eyes, searching for a flicker of recognition, a hint of the man I'd fallen in love with. But all I saw was a stranger who was deliberately, methodically, driving me insane. The anger flared, hotter and brighter now. I couldn't let him win. I couldn't let him erase me. I had to do something. Something drastic. Something unforgettable. I walked away from him, my head held high, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. He hadn't heard me before. He would hear me now. He would hear me loud and clear. The invitation shimmered in my hand, printed on thick cream-colored stock with elegant script. Mr. and Mrs. Liam Sterling requests the pleasure of your company. It was a dinner party. A formal black tie affair hosted by Liam's boss, Mr. Caldwell, and his wife, Eleanor. The kind of event where careers were made and reputations were cemented. Liam had told me about it weeks ago, before the silence had truly descended. He'd been excited. This was a big opportunity, a chance to impress the higher-ups and solidify his position at the firm. I'd almost forgotten about it. But then the invitation arrived, a perfectly timed weapon in my arsenal. It was the perfect stage, a room full of influential people, all eyes on us. The perfect opportunity to expose Liam's charade, to make him acknowledge me in front of everyone. I knew it was risky. It could backfire spectacularly. I could ruin Liam's career, destroy our marriage completely. But I was past caring about the consequences. The alternative, continuing to exist in this silent, isolating hell, was unbearable. The week leading up to the party was a blur of frantic preparations. I bought a dress, a stunning emerald green number that hugged my curves and made my eyes pop. I booked a hair appointment and a manicure. I wanted to look my best, not for Liam, but for myself. I needed to feel powerful, in control. Liam, meanwhile, continued his performance. He'd ask me perfunctory questions. What are you doing? Or where are you going? But his eyes never met mine. His voice was always flat, detached. It was like he was reading from a script. I answered him, of course. I played along. I wanted him to think I was oblivious, that I hadn't figured out his game. The day of the party arrived, heavy with anticipation and dread. I spent the afternoon getting ready, meticulously applying my makeup, teasing my hair into cascading waves. With each step, the resolve hardened within me. By the time Liam came home from work, I was a vision in green, radiating a confidence I didn't quite feel. He glanced at me, a flicker of something, surprise, in his eyes, but he quickly masked it. You look nice, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Thank you, I replied, meeting his gaze directly. So do you. The drive to the Caldwell's mansion was silent and tense. I could feel Liam's eyes on me, but I refused to acknowledge him. I just stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. The mansion was even more opulent than I'd imagined. A sprawling estate with manicured lawns, glittering chandeliers, and a seemingly endless array of impeccably dressed guests. As we walked through the front door, Liam placed a hand on my lower back, a gesture that felt strangely unfamiliar. It was for show, of course. He wanted to project the image of a happy, successful couple. I plastered a smile on my face and played along. We made small talk with Mr. Caldwell, a portly man with a booming voice and a predatory smile. He was all charm and bonhomie, but I could sense the steel beneath the surface. Liam, my boy, you're looking well, he boomed, clapping Liam on the shoulder. And Ava, you're radiant. Liam's a lucky man. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell, I said, my smile feeling brittle. Eleanor is just dying to meet you, my dear, he continued, gesturing towards a woman with a severe expression and an even more severe hairstyle. She's been hearing so much about you. Eleanor Caldwell subjected me to a thorough once-over, her eyes lingering on my dress. Yes, well, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Come along, dear. Let me introduce you to some of the other wives. I followed Eleanor into the throng of women, each one a carefully crafted trophy wife, adorned with diamonds and designer clothes. The air was thick with perfume and whispered gossip. I felt like an imposter. I didn't belong in this world of wealth and privilege. As I navigated the room, making polite conversation, I could feel Liam watching me. He was always just a few steps behind, observing my every move. The tension was building, coiling tighter and tighter in my stomach. I knew my moment was coming. It arrived during dinner. We were seated at a long, mahogany table, surrounded by a sea of glittering silverware and sparkling crystal. Liam was to my right, Mr. Caldwell to my left. The conversation flowed around me, a mix of business deals and social chatter. I listened politely, offering the occasional smile or nod. Then I cleared my throat. Liam, I said, my voice clear and strong, did you remember to pick up the dry cleaning? I need my blue dress for the charity gala next week. Silence fell. All eyes turned to Liam. He stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. He didn't respond. I repeated myself, louder this time. Liam, the dry cleaning? Did you pick it up? Still nothing. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. This was it. Liam, I said, my voice sharp and demanding. Answer me! Did you get the dry cleaning? He finally turned to me, his eyes cold and distant. What? He asked, his voice flat. The dry cleaning, I snapped. The blue dress. The one I told you about 3 times this week. Did you pick it up, or are you just pretending you can't hear me again? The silence was deafening. Every eye in the room was fixed on us. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat nervously. Eleanor Caldwell's lips were pressed into a thin, disapproving line. Liam's face was flushed. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I pressed my advantage. You know, it's funny, Liam, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You seem to have a selective hearing problem. You can hear Mr. Caldwell perfectly fine when he's talking about bonuses and promotions. But when your wife asks you a simple question, suddenly you're deaf as a doornail. A few nervous titters rippled through the room. I didn't care. Tell me, Liam, I continued, my voice rising. Is it just me you can't hear? Or are you just pretending I don't exist? Liam finally snapped. Ava, stop it, he hissed, his voice low and menacing. Stop what, Liam? I shot back. Stop embarrassing you? Maybe if you weren't so busy pretending I wasn't here, I wouldn't have to resort to this. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a loud scrape. I'm sorry, everyone, I said, addressing the room. I didn't mean to cause a scene, but I think it's time I had a little chat with my husband. In private, I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving Liam standing there, speechless and humiliated. I didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was certain, the game had changed. The cool night air hit me as I stepped onto the Caldwell's sprawling patio. I needed to breathe, to clear the suffocating tension that had been building for weeks. The scent of jasmine hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the bitter taste in my mouth. I leaned against the stone railing, gazing out at the manicured lawns that stretched into the darkness. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, leaving me shaky and vulnerable. Had I gone too far? Had I destroyed everything? I didn't have time to dwell on it. I knew Liam would be out here soon, ready to unleash his fury. And I was right. A few minutes later, he appeared, his face a mask of anger. What the hell was that, Ava? He demanded, his voice low and dangerous. What did you expect, Liam? I retorted, meeting his gaze. Did you think I was just going to stand there and let you ignore me forever? You humiliated me in front of everyone, he shouted, his voice rising. Mr. Caldwell, Eleanor, my colleagues, you've ruined me. And you ruined me weeks ago, Liam. You're being dramatic. I've just been stressed at work. That's a lie. This isn't about work. It's something else. He stepped closer, his eyes blazing. You have no idea what you've done, he hissed. You've jeopardized my career, our future. And you've jeopardized our marriage, Liam, I said, my voice trembling. You've treated me like I'm invisible. Like I don't matter. That's not true, he protested, but the words lacked conviction. Then why, Liam? Why have you been ignoring me? He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. Tell me, I demanded. Please, just tell me what's going on. He sighed, a deep, ragged breath. It's complicated, Ava. Complicated how? He hesitated for a long moment, then finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. I've been talking to someone. My heart sank. I knew it! I knew there was someone else. Talking to someone? I repeated, my voice hollow. What do you mean talking? Just talking, he said, avoiding my eyes. A colleague at work. Her name is Chloe. She's been helpful. That was it? He'd been confiding in some woman named Chloe, while I was left to wander in the wilderness of his silence. Helpful? I repeated, my voice laced with sarcasm. Is that what you call it? Because it looks a lot like an emotional affair to me. He didn't deny it. I didn't mean for it to happen, he said, his voice pleading. It just happened. Chloe understands the pressure I'm under at work. You just haven't been understanding lately. Understanding? I scoffed. How can I be understanding when you won't even talk to me? The anger surged back, hotter and more intense than before. I wanted to scream, to hit him, to break something. So, that's it then, I said, my voice trembling with rage and hurt. You've found someone else. Someone who's more understanding. Someone who makes you feel better about yourself. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence spoke volumes. Then get out, Liam, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Get out of my life. He looked at me, his eyes filled with shock and disbelief. Ava, don't say that. I didn't mean for this to happen. I still love you. Love me? I repeated, my voice dripping with contempt. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have betrayed me. You wouldn't have left me feeling so alone. I can fix this, Ava, he pleaded. Just give me a chance. It's too late, Liam, I said, my voice cold and final. It's over. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the darkness. As I walked back towards the mansion, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was over. The charade, the silence, the lies. It was all over. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was finally free. I spent the next few days in a daze. The apartment felt empty and cavernous without Liam's presence. Every object, every corner was a reminder of what we had lost, or perhaps what we never truly had. The silence was gone, replaced by a different kind of emptiness, a void where his voice used to be, where his touch used to linger. I tried to distract myself. I cleaned the apartment. I went for long walks. I met up with friends for coffee. But nothing seemed to fill the void. Sleep was elusive. When I did manage to drift off, my dreams were haunted by images of Liam and Chloe, laughing and whispering secrets. I knew I had to move on. I had to rebuild my life. But the thought of starting over, of facing the future alone, was terrifying. One evening, as I was scrolling through social media, I saw a picture of Liam and Chloe. They were at a restaurant, sitting close together, their faces lit by candlelight. Chloe was laughing, her hand resting on Liam's arm. A wave of nausea washed over me. The pain was sharp and visceral, like a knife twisting in my gut. I slammed my laptop shut and burst into tears. I couldn't do this. I couldn't just sit back and watch him move on with his life, while I was left to pick up the pieces of our shattered marriage. I needed to confront her. I needed to look Chloe in the eye and understand what had drawn Liam to her. I found her on LinkedIn. Chloe Bennett. Her profile picture showed a smiling, confident woman with bright blue eyes and a sleek, professional haircut. She worked in the mergers and acquisitions department at Liam's firm. I hesitated for a long moment, then clicked the message button. Chloe, I typed, my fingers trembling. I need to talk to you. A few hours later, she responded. Ava, she wrote, I don't think that's a good idea. It's not a request, I replied. It's a necessity. We agreed to meet the following day at a coffee shop near her office. The next morning, I woke up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I spent hours getting ready, trying to project an image of strength and composure. By the time I arrived at the coffee shop, I was a nervous wreck. Chloe was already there, sitting at a table near the window. She was even more striking in person than she was in her profile picture. I took a deep breath and walked towards her. "Chloe," I said, my voice trembling slightly. She looked up, her expression cool and guarded. "Ava," she replied. "Thanks for meeting me. Don't thank me yet," I said, sitting down across from her. "I'm not here to be friendly." She raised an eyebrow. "What are you here for, then?" "I want to know why," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "Why did you do this? Why did you steal my husband?" Chloe sighed. "I didn't steal anyone, Ava. Liam came to me, and you welcomed him with open arms, didn't you?" I retorted. "It wasn't like that," she said, her voice defensive. "Liam was going through a tough time. He needed someone to talk to, and you just happened to be there, conveniently available," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I cared about him," she said, her eyes flashing. "I still do." "Care about him?" I repeated, my voice incredulous. "You destroyed his marriage. You hurt his wife. Is that what you call caring?" "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice softening. "I know this is difficult for you." "Difficult?" I shouted, my voice rising. "This is devastating. You've ripped my life apart." I burst into tears, unable to contain my emotions any longer. Chloe reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. "I'm sorry, Ava," she said, her voice sincere. "I truly am." I pulled my hand away. "Don't touch me," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "I never wanted this to happen," she continued. "But Liam and I, we have a connection. A connection that you and he didn't have anymore." "That's bullshit," I said, wiping away my tears. "We had a connection. We were married. We built a life together. But that life wasn't working for him anymore," she said, her voice firm. "He was unhappy. I made him happy, and what about me?" I demanded. "Did you ever think about how your actions would affect me?" She looked down, avoiding my gaze. "I know I hurt you," she said, "and for that, I am truly sorry." I stood up, pushing my chair back with a loud scrape. "Your apologies mean nothing to me," I said, my voice cold and final. "You've ruined my life. I hope you're happy." I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Chloe sitting alone at the table. The meeting had accomplished nothing. I still didn't understand why Liam had been drawn to her. I still felt betrayed and heartbroken. But one thing was clear. I couldn't let Chloe define my future. I had to move on, to rebuild my life, to find happiness again. The months that followed were a slow, arduous process of healing. I moved out of the apartment I had shared with Liam and found a small, cozy place of my own. It was a fresh start, a blank canvas on which I could paint a new life. I threw myself into my work, taking on new projects and responsibilities. It was a welcome distraction, a way to focus my energy on something productive. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I started taking yoga classes and joined a book club. I filled my life with activities that brought me joy and fulfillment. I also started seeing a therapist. It was difficult at first to open up to a stranger about my pain and vulnerability, but gradually I learned to trust her, to confide in her, to let her guide me through the healing process. She helped me understand that Liam's actions were not a reflection of my worth as a person. He had made a choice, a selfish and hurtful choice, but it didn't diminish my value or my capacity for love. She also helped me forgive myself. I had spent so long blaming myself for Liam's behavior, wondering what I could have done differently to prevent it. But she helped me realize that I wasn't responsible for his actions. He was the one who had made the choices, and he was the one who had to live with the consequences. Slowly but surely, the pain began to subside. The memories of Liam and Chloe became less frequent and less intense. The anger and resentment faded away, replaced by a quiet acceptance. I realized that I was stronger than I thought. I had survived the worst thing that had ever happened to me, and I had come out the other side, scarred but not broken. One day, I was walking through the park when I saw Liam sitting on a bench. He was alone, staring into space. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to approach him. "Liam," I said, my voice calm and neutral. He looked up, his eyes filled with surprise. "Ava," he said. "What are you doing here?" "I was just taking a walk," I said. "How are you?" He shrugged. "I'm okay," he said. "Things are complicated," I nodded. "I can imagine," I said. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the children playing in the distance. "I wanted to apologize," Liam said finally. "For everything. For hurting you, for betraying you, for ruining our marriage. I accept your apology, Liam," I said. "But it doesn't change anything, I know," he said. "But I needed to say it. I needed you to know that I'm sorry." "I know you are," I said. "And I appreciate it." We sat in silence again, the tension between us slowly dissipating. "How are you doing?" Liam asked. "I'm doing well," I said. "I'm happy." "I'm moving on." He smiled, a sad, wistful smile. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "I hope you find happiness too, Liam," I said. "You deserve it." He nodded. "I hope so too," he said. I stood up. "Well, I should get going," I said. "It was nice to see you, Liam." "You too, Ava," he said. I turned and walked away, leaving him sitting on the bench. As I walked out of the park, I felt a sense of closure. I had said everything I needed to say. I had forgiven Liam, and I had forgiven myself. It was time to move on, to embrace the future, to create a new life filled with love, joy, and happiness. Years passed. I built a successful career, traveled the world, and cultivated deep and meaningful friendships. I even started dating again, though I was cautious, guarded, unwilling to let anyone get too close. The scars from my marriage to Liam had faded, but they were still there, a reminder of the pain I had endured. Then, one day, I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Liam's mother, Evelyn. "Ava, dear," she said, her voice trembling. "I have some news about Liam." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it, Evelyn?" I asked, my voice tight. "Liam is sick," she said, her voice breaking. "Very sick." "Sick?" I repeated, my mind reeling. "What's wrong?" "He has cancer," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's aggressive." I was stunned, speechless. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Evelyn, I stammered. "I don't know what to say. He's in the hospital," she said. "He wants to see you, Ava." I hesitated. I hadn't seen Liam in years. We had both moved on with our lives. Why would he want to see me now? "I don't know, Evelyn," I said. "It's been a long time. Please, Ava," she pleaded. "For me." "He needs you." I sighed. "Okay, Evelyn," I said. "I'll come." The hospital room was sterile and impersonal. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and fear. Liam was lying in bed, his face pale and gaunt. He had lost a lot of weight, and his eyes were sunken and shadowed. He looked so frail, so vulnerable. It was hard to believe that this was the same man who had once been so strong and confident. I sat down in the chair beside his bed and took his hand. His skin was cold and clammy. "Ava," he said, his voice weak and raspy. "Liam," I replied, my voice trembling. "How are you feeling?" "Not great," he said with a weak smile. "But I'm glad you're here." We sat in silence for a moment, looking at each other. "I'm sorry, Ava," he said finally. "For everything." I was a fool. "It's okay, Liam," I said. "It's in the past." "No, it's not okay," he said, his voice rising. "I hurt you. I betrayed you. I ruined our life together. I've forgiven you, Liam," I said. "You need to forgive yourself." He shook his head. "I don't know if I can," he said. "You have to try," I said. "For your own sake." We talked for hours. We reminisced about the good times. We laughed about silly memories. And we cried about the pain and regret. He told me about his life after our divorce, about his struggles, his successes, his regrets. He told me about Chloe, who had left him after a few months, unable to cope with the pressure of being the other woman. He told me that he had never stopped loving me, that he had always regretted his actions. As I sat there, listening to him, I realized that I still cared about him. Not in the same way that I had once cared about him, but I still cared about him as a person. I forgave him completely, not just for my sake, but for his sake. I spent the next few weeks visiting Liam in the hospital. We talked, we laughed, we cried. We shared our hopes, our fears, and our dreams. I watched as he slowly faded away, his body ravaged by the cancer. One evening, as I was sitting beside his bed, he took my hand. "Ava," he said, his voice weak but clear. "Thank you." "For what, Liam?" I asked. "For being here," he said. "For forgiving me?" "For giving me peace." He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "I love you, Ava," he whispered. And then he was gone. Liam's death was a profound loss. It was the end of an era, the closing of a chapter in my life. I grieved for him, for the man he had been, for the man he could have been. I grieved for our lost love, for the dreams we had shared, for the future we had envisioned. But I also found a sense of peace. I knew that he was finally at rest, free from pain and suffering. I knew that I had done everything I could to help him, to support him, to forgive him. I had given him the gift of closure, the gift of peace. And in doing so, I had given myself those same gifts. I attended his funeral, standing alongside his family and friends. I listened to the eulogies, remembering the good times, the laughter, the love. As I stood there, surrounded by the mourners, I realized that Liam's life had not been in vain. He had touched the lives of many people. He had made a difference in the world. And even though our marriage had ended in pain and betrayal, it had also been filled with love and joy. I would never forget him. He would always be a part of me, a part of my story, but I would not let his memory hold me back. I would not let the pain and regret define my future. I would move on, I would embrace life, I would find happiness again. I knew that Liam would want that for me. He would want me to live a full and meaningful life, to love and be loved, to find joy and fulfillment in every day. And that is exactly what I intended to do. I left the funeral with a heavy heart, but also with a sense of hope. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibilities. I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, with courage, resilience, and grace. I was ready to live my life to the fullest, to honor Liam's memory, and to create a new chapter filled with love, joy, and happiness. The silence was finally broken, and in its place, I found my voice. Life moved on, as it always does. The initial sharp grief softened into a dull ache, a reminder of the past, but no longer a crippling weight. I continued working, traveling, and nurturing my friendships. I even tentatively dipped my toes back into the dating pool, navigating the strange and often awkward world of online profiles and first dates. Most of them were disasters. There was the guy who spent the entire evening talking about his stamp collection, the one who kept checking his phone under the table, and the one who insisted on splitting the bill right down to the last penny. I started to think that maybe I was destined to be alone, that my heart was simply too bruised to ever truly open again. Then I met Daniel. He was different from anyone I dated before. He was kind, intelligent, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. He listened patiently to my stories, both happy and sad, and he never judged me for my past. He was a writer, with a gentle soul and a quiet strength that I found incredibly appealing. We met at a bookstore. I was browsing the poetry section, searching for a particular volume of Emily Dickinson, when I bumped into him. Literally, we both reached for the same book at the same time, our hands brushing. I remember feeling a jolt of electricity, a spark that I hadn't felt in years. We laughed, apologized, and started talking. We discovered that we shared a love of literature, art, and long walks in the park. We exchanged numbers, and he called me the very next day. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant in my neighborhood. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. I felt comfortable with him, at ease, like I could be myself without fear of judgment. He didn't pry into my past, but he listened with genuine empathy when I eventually told him about Liam, about the silence, the betrayal, and the illness. He didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. He simply listened, held my hand, and told me that he understood. As the weeks turned into months, our relationship deepened. I found myself falling in love with him, slowly and cautiously, but with a growing sense of hope. He was patient, understanding, and incredibly supportive. He made me laugh, he made me feel safe, and he made me believe that I was worthy of love. One evening, we were sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset. The sky was ablaze with color, a vibrant tapestry of orange, pink, and purple. "You know," Daniel said, turning to me, "I never thought I'd find someone like you. Someone so strong, so resilient, so beautiful inside and out." I blushed. "You're just saying that," I said, playfully pushing his shoulder. "No, I mean it," he said, taking my hand in his. "You've been through so much, and yet you're still so open to love. It's truly inspiring." He paused, took a deep breath, and looked me directly in the eyes. "Ava," he said, his voice serious, "I love you. I love everything about you. I love your strength, your kindness, your intelligence, your vulnerability. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." My heart fluttered. Tears welled up in my eyes. I couldn't believe it. After everything I'd been through, I had finally found someone who truly loved me for who I was. "I love you too, Daniel," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "More than words can say," he smiled. A warm and genuine smile that lit up his entire face. He leaned in and kissed me, a long, tender kiss that sealed our commitment to each other. A few months later, Daniel proposed. He took me back to the bookstore where we had first met, and he got down on one knee in the poetry section, surrounded by the books that had brought us together. I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was small and intimate, held in a beautiful garden filled with flowers. We invited only our closest friends and family. My parents, who had been so worried about me after my divorce, were overjoyed to see me so happy. They embraced Daniel warmly, welcoming him into our family with open arms. My best friend, Sarah, was my maid of honor. She had been my rock throughout the years, always there to listen, to offer advice, and to make me laugh. I couldn't have imagined getting through everything without her. As I walked down the aisle, I saw Daniel standing at the altar, his eyes filled with love and admiration. I smiled, and my heart swelled with happiness. The ceremony was beautiful and heartfelt. We exchanged vows that we had written ourselves, promising to love and cherish each other through good times and bad, in sickness and in health. As we said "I do," I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I had never experienced before. I knew that I had finally found my soulmate, the person who was meant to be with me. After the ceremony, we celebrated with our guests, dancing, laughing, and sharing stories. I felt surrounded by love and support, and I knew that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. During the reception, my father gave a touching speech. He talked about my strength and resilience, about how I had overcome so much adversity and had emerged stronger than ever. He talked about Daniel's kindness and compassion, about how he had brought so much joy into my life. "Ava," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "I am so proud of you. You have found a wonderful man, and I know that you will be happy together. Remember the lessons you've learned, cherish each other, and never take your love for granted." I smiled at my father, tears streaming down my face. I knew that he was right. I had learned so much from my past, and I was determined to make the most of my future. As the evening drew to a close, Daniel and I stood hand in hand, watching the last of our guests depart. "Well," Daniel said, turning to me with a smile, "we did it. We're married." "We did," I said, leaning in to kiss him. And I couldn't be happier. We walked hand in hand towards our new life, a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. Years later, I found a box tucked away in the attic of our home. It was filled with old letters, photographs, and mementos from my past. As I sorted through the contents, I came across a letter addressed to me, written in Liam's handwriting. It was dated shortly before his death. I hesitated for a moment, then carefully opened the envelope. "My dearest Ava," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I know that I hurt you deeply, and I will never forgive myself for the pain I caused you. I hope that, in time, you will be able to forgive me too. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even after everything that happened, you were always in my heart. I made a terrible mistake, and I regret it every single day. I've been thinking a lot about our life together, about the good times and the bad. I remember the day we first met, the day we got married, the day we bought our first home. We had so many dreams, so many plans for the future. I know that I shattered those dreams, but I hope that you have been able to rebuild your life and find happiness again. You deserve it, Ava. You deserve all the love and joy in the world. I've heard that you found someone new, someone who makes you happy. I'm so glad for you. I hope that he treats you well, that he loves you unconditionally, and that he gives you the life that I couldn't. Please don't dwell on the past. Learn from your mistakes, but don't let them define you. Embrace the future and live each day to the fullest. I will always love you, Ava. Goodbye! With all my love, Liam. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading the letter. It was a poignant reminder of our past, of the love we had shared, and of the pain we had endured. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. I closed the lid and carried the box downstairs, placing it on a shelf in our living room. It was a part of my history, a reminder of who I was and where I had come from. But it was not my future. My future was with Daniel, with our love, with our life together. I walked into the garden where Daniel was tending to his roses. I sat down beside him and took his hand. "What's wrong?" he asked, sensing my sadness. I told him about the letter, about Liam's words, about the emotions it had stirred up. He listened patiently, holding my hand tightly. When I had finished, he smiled at me. "He loved you, Ava," he said, "and you loved him. That's nothing to be ashamed of. It's part of what makes you who you are." He paused, then added, "But he's gone now, and you're here with me, and I love you more than anything in the world." I leaned in and kissed him, a long and tender kiss that sealed our love. I knew that I was finally at peace. I had forgiven Liam. I had forgiven myself. And I had found true love. The silence was finally broken, and my heart was finally full.